and welcome to this podcast. I'm Sigrun Rodriguez. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at David Horn, and I'm very excited to have you guys here today. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. My name's McAuley. I'm one of the directors at Triangle.
Hi, I'm Maxime Cole, and I'm also director at Triangle.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about Triangle. What is Triangle?
So Triangle was created in 1997, and we now currently provide specialist support to children and consultancy and with training, but we also provide expert opinion, we provide intermediaries, we provide therapeutic services as well, and they're very bespoke depending on what's needed for the children and young people. So a lot of the children and young people we provide that service to, they have had abusive starts to their lives, and we're trying to help them come to terms with that. We provide advocacy services. What have I missed?
Investigative interview.
Which is what we're here to talk about. Over to Carly.
So, yeah, our investigative interviewing service is really just growing every year. So we're doing more and more, and it's what we mainly do now, really, isn't it? Mm. That and a lot of training.
Yes. Yeah. So specifically at children or
interviewing.
Yes.
Well, our specialism is with children and young people, but we actually work with people up to the age of 60. So we would be asked to do investigative interviews if an adult had additional needs or communication difficulties that made it harder for somebody else to interview them. So we'll use the same skills that we use to interview children and young people for everybody anyway. That's a real fundamental Triangle belief, isn't it? That if we get it right with the youngest children with the most complex needs, then it helps our communication with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So is this related to police investigations then? So you do investigative interviewings for what type of investigations specifically?
Well, there's quite a range. So some of the interviews we do are directly referred to us by the police, and it might be because the child's very young. So we interview lots of 2 and 3 year olds for the police, or it might be that the child's got very complex needs, or quite often we find that children have been really taught to hate the police and told that they mustn't speak to the police. So there's already this barrier there. So I think us coming in as an independent organisation can make it much easier for the child to communicate with us. So a whole variety of those investigations could be anything, but primarily it's sexual and physical abuse investigations that we're involved in. And then some of our work comes from the family court. So we're asked to interview children so that the court can make decisions going forward. But it's not quite as simple as that, is it? Because sometimes we'll interview a child for family court, but what they end up saying makes that interview go back to the criminal court and back through a police investigation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You're discovering things in the process that nobody was aware of, really.
Yes, exactly. It's quite fluid. The police are in a little bit of a difficult situation with some children where if a child says something that's potentially concerning to a teacher, for example, the police then in the UK have to go out to visit that child with a social worker and try to get the child to repeat what they've said to the teacher. So say it again before they'll go to a visually recorded interview. But for some children, it might have taken them 4 years to build enough rapport with that teacher or feel comfortable enough to tell that teacher. And they don't know that social worker or that police officer. And they're expected to go out and get a repeat of that straight away without having built any rapport, really. So often that doesn't work. So they then don't go on to be interviewed. Then ultimately it ends up in family court, and then we interview. So actually that child has said something potentially concerning before, but it never went to police interview because they didn't repeat what they'd said in that initial visit. It's difficult.
We're becoming kind of more aware the more police we're training of kind of the systems and the way they work. And more recently, in one of the courses where we trained local police force, they talked about having no further action, and that isn't necessarily to do with kind of what the child said. It's not having enough evidence or not having the standard of evidence that would go to court, whereas we specialise particularly in knowing kind of what questions to ask and how to ask them and what's needed for then more kind of actions to take place.
Yeah. So you know, kind of, you're trained and have the special competence to dig into the hard questions to get that evidence, right?
Yes, and some of the things are really quite simple. You know, we're training the police to ask questions in a different way because, for example, if you ask a child why something happened, they find that really, really difficult to answer. But if you use a simple rephrase of what made him do that instead of why did he do that, they're then able to answer the question. So, and we spend a lot of time explaining to children that we don't know what happened because we weren't there, because children assume that adults know everything.
Yeah.
And then they therefore don't see the need to provide the information that they're being asked for because, you know, they're thinking, well, you already know. Why am I going through this with you? So we do a lot of that, don't we? Of we don't know because we weren't there.
Yeah. So from what I understand, you do train police forces.
Yes. So we've trained a lot of different police forces now. So we some police forces come to us. So we're based in Brighton, and then others we train in force. So we go to them and go and train in their headquarters.
So what is this training? What does it consist of?
So it's called FQC. It stands for Forensic Questioning of Children. When we initially started training, it was a 4 or 5 day course and it involved police officers taking an exam. So it was a pass-fail course. Then COVID hit. Then since COVID, after speaking to many forces, we realised that to have them out for 4 or 5 days was just really difficult for the police forces. So it was making commissioners reluctant to do that. So we've managed to kind of compact it more into a 3-day course, which is where we're at now. And it doesn't have a pass-fail examination, but the last day is spent a lot of the police practicing what we've spent 2 days learning so that we can observe it, so that if we did have any major concerns, which has happened but very rarely, then we would follow that up.
Okay.
Yeah, and we offer support to police after the course as well. So they can contact us, they can phone us or email us, and they do. They might say, oh, you know, I've got this 3-year-old that says this, what, you know, should we go and talk to him or should we go straight to interview? So yes, it's nice to be able to kind of be there afterwards as well and advise on.
And we had a query last week, didn't we, about I think the child's now 3.5, but they were 2.5 when the incident happened, and the police were just messaging us to say, is it still viable to interview? Should we still interview? So it's a real range of questions. Sometimes it's supporting them with live cases, and other times it's helping them decide whether that should take place, whether it's in the child's best interests or not.
Absolutely. So we know that, you know, when you're trained, that knowledge can, over time, you become better, but you can also forget about things from after you had the training. Do you do any kind of repeat training, or is it like a one-off and then that's it, then you're good? Or is it more like a consultancy after, like you mentioned?
We also do a 1-day refresher call.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's really important because sometimes, you can forget, like you say, or you can unlearn elements of it and perhaps not use the techniques to the full potential.
Yeah.
So yes, we do refresher courses as well. So on the course, we cover a lot of the basics about what language to use with children, how you can adapt your communication and simplify your communication to make it better, easier for children to understand. And we cover a lot of rapport building because that's absolutely essential, and teach them how we build rapport with children. And then we cover a lot about sort of attention and arousal. So keeping an eye on the child and kind of where they're at within their window of tolerance. And, you know, are they able to communicate, or do we need to help them by doing something calming or doing something lively to get them back to a place where they're able to communicate? We do a lot of troubleshooting of, teaching what you would do if a child did this, and a lot of focus on separating out events with children. So we get called in, that's another thing we get asked to do quite a lot, isn't it? To do what we call unmuddling interviews. So this is when, and this happens a lot, children are asked repeatedly. So they might have told their teacher something, and then the safeguarding lead asks them about it. And then they get a visit from the social worker and the police, and they ask them about it. And then they perhaps get police protected and they move into foster care, and then the foster carers ask them about it. Then they get a social worker, and the social worker asks them. And then the next month they get a new social worker, and that social worker asks them about it. And by the time they get to interview, it's so muddled where they've been asked again and again and again about something.
So we often get family members recording them.
Yes, doing their own interviews on their phones.
Interesting.
Yes, it's all so muddled a lot of the time by the time it gets to us, isn't it? So we teach the police about that as well. So sort of how to tell which parts have come from the child and which parts have been added by well-meaning adults along the way. So we often say to children, so we need to find out what you saw with your own eyes, heard with your own ears, and felt with your own body. And then it's all sort of anchored back to that, isn't it? So we can separate out.
And we'll acknowledge, we know you've told lots of people, we know you've spoken to lots of different people, and if we can, we'll list those people, won't we? And we'll say, and our job is to really think about everything that we've heard and that you've said, and to get it really right.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some, so I'm from Norway, and in Norway we've had a few cases where like whole villages have been in a bad state because basically the interviews weren't done correctly. Because so, teachers, lots of different people have been kind of accused for doing things, and it's turned out that the interviews weren't done correctly. And there's some really bad miscarriages of justice following that. So
and
I
it's
guess
often because people are trying to be helpful, like Hurley said. It's not
exactly.
Obviously sometimes you get it where people are trying to change a story or change what's happened, but in our experience, the majority of the time it's because people are trying to help their children, but actually it's not. And we also know, I don't know about in Norway, but in England, the advice, the training that's given to school staff particularly, because we know that's a place where a lot of children do talk about things, is a lot of negative. So don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, but not do. So another thing that we've started a couple of years ago post-COVID was these little workshops for school staff, where again, we know that there's huge funding issues. So they're up to 2 hours long, where we go and we talk about things that you can do rather than not, because it's all very negative guidance out there currently.
It scares professionals off, the guidance that a lot of people are given in their sort of safeguarding training. So don't ask any questions, don't do this, don't do that. Professionals need to be taught how to safely listen to children's concerns so that by the time that children are interviewed about things, hopefully it's only the second time they've talked about it, not the 22nd time that they've talked about it. That sounds interesting, what you're saying about Norway.
Absolutely. Yes, and of course this, I do believe, and hopefully it has changed after these things have happened. So we have these barnahuds where children are being brought in to be interviewed properly, like you guys. But why do you, so you work mainly within the UK, right?
Yes.
Yes. Do you work with any international organisations as well?
We have I think it was 2018, me and a colleague flew to India and we trained the High Court judges in Delhi. And we then flew to southern India and trained a whole load of different professionals down there in the FQC training, so how to communicate with children. So that has been our kind of main international training. We have, we do a lot nationally, so we train the police nationally, as Carly has mentioned, and also social workers in schools and frontline workers. We'd kind of try and link a lot of our training to serious case reviews, because obviously that out of those comes lots of learning points for us as a culture and a country. We've developed resources with the NSPCC, and we've also done some work with MOPAC, which is the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. And they kind of look at the Met Police and make sure that everything they're doing is efficient. So we've helped them think about scripts for young people and vulnerable people who come into custody and need to kind of understand processes a bit more. We do interview children that have very limited speech, so that use other ways to communicate as well. So symbols or picture books, or years ago we interviewed someone with the eye gaze, use the eye gaze machine as well to communicate. So it's more about the understanding us, I suppose, isn't it, as well as the communicating. So there's a film we made in the 90s called Two-Way Street, which is all about communication being a two-way and not just putting it on the child, but actually it's the adult's responsibility as well. And you know that kind of as a person, that if you're talking to someone and they're not interested in you, then you're not going to tell them very much. Whereas if you've got a person that is interested and engaged and giving you the right non-verbal cues and signals, you're going to engage a lot more. And this is the case for children. And they're brought up in a society where in the past a lot has been done to them by adults. So then to suddenly put them in a position where the adult's asking them to talk about something that they have the knowledge of, children are a bit like, well, this isn't usual. You know, kids go to school and the teachers know everything, and kids are at home and the parents are completely in control of what's happening. So it's really trying to get those children and young people to realise that they're the expert and that we're part of a two-way process with them to help them tell us their expertise, because we don't know. And as Carly mentioned earlier, we can spend quite a lot of time in rapport building, reassuring children that that's what we need. So there's a rule called the no guessing rule that we practice with children a lot. And at school, children are taught to guess all the time. And, you know, for us for them to come and see us and us to say, right, in this room, we don't do guessing. What colour's my car? And they're like, red. We're like, well, in this one, you're not doing guessing. Yes. Have you seen my car? Do you know what colour my car is? So I think for us, a lot in the training, the key point of that is to help the police and other adults understand that you have to spend time helping children understand this switch of roles.
It's just such a different process, isn't it? And with you talking about it being that sort of two-way street as well, it's everyone that we train, we try to really outline that children's communicative competence is really reliant on the adult's communicative competence. You can't get a good answer by asking a bad question. It's not going to work. So the adults really need to develop their questioning skills to enable children to give their best evidence. I mean, certainly in the UK, there's a saying, I don't know if you have it in Norway, never work with children or animals. So children are being blamed for their lack of competence all the time. So, you know, we've heard people say, you know, if someone asked me to interview a 3-year-old, I'd run a mile. And it's almost that, that child isn't good enough at communicating, but actually it's us.
It's breaking the barriers, isn't it? So, you'll get police saying, oh, well, they can't even sit still, so how can you interview them? It's like, well, do you have to sit still to interview them? Can you do it standing up? Like, can you do it while you're moving on the floor? It's looking at it's breaking those adults' expectations of how children should behave, I suppose, and thinking, well, actually, it's about me. And another bit to add to that is, so Two-Way Street's a film we made in the 90s, and then we followed it up years later with Three-Way Street, because we realised that actually a lot of these children's interactions, it wasn't just with one adult, there was normally two other adults. And then if you think about that dynamic, that's children being put in a room with two other adults. So that's almost making it harder for the children, because they've got two adults who they think know everything and, know about things. So you have to help. And Carly and I do a lot of that when we're interviewing, where we're talking with each other, and I'll say, well, Carly, I don't know because I wasn't there. Do you know?
No, I haven't seen that either.
So we'll do a lot
and then they understand.
Yeah, together.
Yeah.
Suddenly the penny drops, doesn't it? So, I've never been to Johnny's school. I don't know what his teachers are like.
No, and I haven't met his mum or his family, and I'm not going to either.
No, so I don't know. And then suddenly Johnny will pipe up, I know. Because he then realises that actually, why we're asking the questions.
Yes.
We teach the police a lot about that as well, because children are baffled sometimes. Like, why on earth are you asking me that?
Yeah. Because adults know everything.
Yeah, exactly. But you talk about the 90s, right? And it's funny because in the UK, you were really early with PACE, of course, which is very relevant to us on the technology side, but also peace. You got these things were implemented early on in the UK. And I'm sure this has developed, right? The cultural side of interviewing, the mindset that the police goes into the interviewing situation with. Like you're saying, you're teaching them that mindset to speak to children and have a different type of mindset, I suppose, when they go into those conversations. So you've been following this since the 90s, and have you seen any change over time? I mean, has it eroded? Has it been better? Like, how would you describe this development since back then?
I mean, I think it has evolved. I think there's some positives and not as well. I think the one thing that for us, Triangle, as an organisation is really key is that we know statistically that children with communication difficulties and disabilities are far more likely to be abused. Yet we are still not supporting those people in everyday life to have communication systems to enable them to communicate that. That's kind of, I suppose, more linked around education, but also ideas of what disabled people and people with communication difficulties are able to do.
Yeah, that hasn't changed very much. Still see that as a big barrier. But what has changed a lot, I think, is the realization that children can give evidence regardless of their age. So it used to be extremely rare that children under 5 would be interviewed, and now it's much, much more common. But we're still not all the way there. There are still very young children who just aren't seen as reliable just because of their age. No. So their evidence isn't being gathered. So sometimes we're asked to interview, 4 out of a 5 sibling group, and we're thinking, why are we not seeing the youngest one? And it's, maybe because they're 2.5, but actually 2.5-year-olds can give really great evidence if they're interviewed in the right way. So that is changing. That's changed a lot since the 90s, though, right?
It has changed a lot. And we were involved many years ago in one of the first cases with a 2-year-old who was a witness to murder. And initially, he was the sole witness. And so initially, the police were very reluctant because he was so young, but we were able to support the 2-year-old to communicate. So they didn't need to know what happened because they knew it was a murder. They didn't need to know where because they knew where. They didn't need to know when because they had a time scale. All they needed to know was who. So, everyone that's met a 2-year-old, they know and they knew this person. So we did that through a mixture of speech and using photos and kind of supporting the young person. And that actually did end up going to trial. And I think that was quite a first for England, really believing that actually that could happen. And even now on our police training, when we mention that, everyone's like, what, too? Like, how did you do that kind of thing? It's just focusing on what information, what's the crucial information. Like Carly said earlier, if you're asking children about timelines, if they've been living in an abusive situation all their lives, and you're thinking about how long this has been happening, time is a huge difficult concept for children anyway. So it depends what the questions are that the information that you need to gather, I suppose. And the same with children and young people that only communicate using, or not only, they communicate using yes and no. It's really important if you're interviewing them that you're getting a balance of yes answers and no answers. Because if you're asking a young person questions and all they're communicating is yes, 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 it's not really credible. Whereas if you're really clever with your questioning and you're getting a yes, no, or yes, yes, no, there's not a pattern, it's much more effective and it's much more evidentially safe.
The other thing, sort of, I don't know, thinking about since the 90s and what's changed and hasn't changed, we have at the moment so interviews would go to the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. They then review the interview and decide whether charges can be brought as a result. But they are asking police forces to keep their interviews to 20 to 30 minutes maximum, because it's more efficient that way for them to review the interview. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't work for children.
No.
It really, really doesn't work for children. We might spend 20 minutes of an interview talking about Play-Doh.
Yes.
And that is needed for that child because that's resettling them, that's letting them know that we're attending to what they're saying and that we're interested in them. We would never be able to limit ourselves on time like that. And I think that is a negative change, isn't it? I think it's trying to be sort of streamlined for efficiency, but actually it really doesn't work for children. We've found as well that some children actually a lot of children that come in to talk to us, they won't really respond to the what have you come to talk to us about today type questions. And we need quite a lot of warm up. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we're not talking to them about their hobbies. It's an interview at that stage, but we might be asking questions like, so tell us all about what it was like living with your mum and dad. And you might get lots and lots of details that aren't evidentially relevant, but actually you might get really relevant stuff because we're starting to then build a picture and an understanding of that child's lived experience. And they might say a few things in there that we can then ask about later. And that's when we get that evidence. We can't do that in 20 minutes.
And
no,
also,
absolutely.
We know that children that are living with trauma, which a lot of the children we meet with are, that they're, like Kylie mentioned earlier, their window of tolerance, they can dip in and out of that. So like Kylie said, you'll be there for hours sometimes, but actually the amount of questions you're asking would only add up to maybe 40 minutes or something, because you're doing so much to support them and not re-traumatize them and, enable them to communicate safely for them and also evidentially safely. So it's almost a balancing act a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. And well, I guess this is where recording comes in as relevant, I suppose. So do you record your interviews with these children?
Yes, we record all of our interviews. We have a interviewing suite here at Triangle in Brighton, and then we have our portable camera from David Horn as well. And so when we're traveling around the country, sometimes we use police interview suites and sometimes we use our portable camera, but we're always recording interviews. So it means that it can then be used as the evidence in chief at court if it's visually recorded. But Also, we have so many children that communicate. Well, I think it's not just us. Children communicate non-verbally a lot. They show a lot. And so good quality recording is just absolutely crucial for that. We interviewed a 7-year-old here who, although she was completely verbal and a competent communicator, she wasn't able to verbally tell us what had happened to her. So almost the whole interview from her perspective was silent. So she was able to draw what had happened. And then she was able to produce paper figures as representations of the people in her family. And we could check with using the paper figures who was in the picture. She was able to show, using those paper figures, actually manipulating them to show us what had happened. And then she was able to indicate on sticky notes. So we gave her written choices. So like one time on one note and more than one time on another note. And she pointed to which one in response, or we had a set yes, no, don't know. So she was able to answer more questions about what had happened. But the visual recording of that is, crucial, beyond crucial. Absolutely needs to be shown.
Yes, needs to be a video recording.
Yeah, otherwise they would be listening to just us talking.
Exactly.
And we've also had an interview with a teenager where, unfortunately, the circumstances within her home were that Dad had had to leave the family home and the family couldn't afford to live in two homes. So just before the interview, she'd been told by Mum, just say it was an accident, like say it wasn't meant to happen, because we can't afford to live like this. We can't afford for your dad to be the breadwinner in running another home with more bills. And so she came to interview, and I can't remember whether she said at the beginning or the end that Mum had said this to her. But anyway, she was, when we were asking her questions, she was verbally saying, oh, no, it didn't happen. But her body, what she was doing with her hands, she was digging in her nails and she was covering her genital area, was showing so much. So for that interview, when we wrote our report at the end of it, we said that the transcript had to be read watching the video so that you could see that although she was saying, no, that definitely didn't happen, what she was showing in her body was very different.
Yes.
But if we hadn't have recorded that, you would have just got the transcript of her saying, no, that didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, that really, when you're also saying, you're asked to do a 20 to 30 minute interview, potentially with a recording that is the same length, then it, there is a lot of pressure on police and on, all of the whole system to cut cost.
Yes.
So this is what we're seeing, and I think this is widely known, right? So there's definitely a balance between quality and cost in this case specifically, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And we offer a transcribing service as well, don't we, after our interviews, because we have learned over the years that other transcribing services that are out there and don't transcribe the non-verbal communication, they just transcribe the verbal communication, whereas we have trained transcribers here who look out for all communication.
Exactly.
That's another service that we offer that quite regularly after we've interviewed that we'll be asked to provide that as well.
There's so many children show what's happened rather than tell.
Well, adults do as well. I'm realising here that I'm like this with my hands all over the place.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, that's what we hear very often, that the best interviewers, independent of case, are the interviewers that interview children, because they are very concrete. They are, really good at building rapport. And I think there's something there that, if you put a child interviewer in front of a suspect, they can do a really, really good job as well, which is really interesting.
Talking about that actually on a couple of weeks ago training one of the police forces, and they interview a lot of suspects and interview a lot of children. And they're saying, "Oh, I'm so going to use some of these techniques for interviewing suspects, especially commenting on non-verbal communication." So when they're saying, they get so many no comment interviews, but if they say, "Oh, you're nodding," that's then in the transcript.
Yes.
And so they can get those responses by verbalizing the non-verbal communication, which is so often missed, because that's what we do with children. They say, "Oh, you're nodding," and they'll say, "Yeah, because that really did happen." They'll add information if we notice and verbalize their non-verbal communication.
So another one might be, "Oh, you're looking at the door." "Yeah, because is he going to come? Is he coming here?"
Yes.
You know, there's these just tiny little comments.
Yeah.
So the other thing I just wanted to add that Carly touched on was, you know, a lot of these children don't have words to talk about what's happened to them, because they shouldn't have words to know these things. So actually, again, these adults are putting them in a situation, asking them to talk about something that they shouldn't really have access to at their age, especially to do obviously with sexual abuse. And often they will have been told by the abuser that this is our little secret, or this is, you know, this is because you're special. So how for that child to communicate that is really hard. So having drawings and all these other resources and showing and having that on camera is just key. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of talk about AI. You know, there is a lot of potential in saving time and cost, of course, through the use of AI. And we see, you know, I just saw a recent transcription research that just highlighted what you said, that the transcribers that are being used are not necessarily trained in anything related to police work or interviewing. And they very often just decide themselves what to put in that transcript, right? So it's interesting to hear, you know, small techniques, like you say, you know, put words on what is going on, and put little comments, and, you know, that there are ways to move around that, right? To make sure that this is highlighted. But I think that is also something that probably will come with more use of technology.
Absolutely, yeah.
And of course, it has to state the nonverbal, which then also requires a video or visual recording.
Yeah.
So, but do you see that these types of technologies can help you in your work in the future? Are you reluctant?
I don't think we're reluctant at all. And I think, yeah, absolutely, we would be interested in exploring technologies that could help us. It's just difficult at the moment to really know in what ways, because the AI that we've experimented with it's not there yet.
Yes.
It's just not that advanced. It needs to learn more, and it will learn more. But yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be really interesting to, I mean, we have used it to kind of help us create resources to explain things to children. And I don't see it as, I think some people see it as a bit of a threat, but AI obviously needs somebody who has those skills and knowledge to tell it what you want. It's a two-way process to an extent. Yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a muddled answer, wasn't it?
No, I think there's pros and cons.
Yeah,
but we do see it. You know, we are beginning to look at it, aren't we, and exploit. But obviously, you've got the huge area of GDPR and confidentiality and all of that. So it's always going to be limited in our work for that reason.
Yeah, because we can't feed it lots of confidential information and ask it to write us an interview plan.
No, exactly. No, currently you can't, but hopefully in the future you can have a safe AI, a secure
But
AI.
also, if you're standing up in court to be cross-examined, you want to have be sure that you've read that bundle of however many pages yourself, rather than depend on
computer reading it for
reading it, and maybe missing out a bit that they didn't think was essential that is.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I mean about it, needing to learn more, because there are so many nuances that the meaning of a sentence can be changed by a single word. And AI is not there yet to notice all of those. So at the moment, everything's still very manual.
And
Absolutely.
I suppose for us as well, sometimes when we're interviewing a child, they might say something that wasn't necessarily in our questioning initially, but if you've read the bundle and you've got that background, you might see that as an important link to something that AI wouldn't necessarily.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Are there any other technologies or innovations or policy changes that you see can support the children's legal status and condition?
Experience in the justice system. One of the things that we've been talking about a lot is to try, we'd really like to train first response officers. So in the police and the ambulance service, to be able to communicate with children. We would love, for example, to help the ambulance service to write a script for their telephone operators, that they can press a button that says, I'm talking to a child, and their prompts change. Because that really early information about reported incidents can be really crucial later on in an investigation. Currently, children aren't necessarily being asked questions that they can process or understand. So we'd really like to, I guess, from an innovation point of view, we'd really love to get involved in that. So, first response officers are rarely given any training in talking to children. And I think that we're missing potentially some really important bits of evidence from children at, almost at the scene of a crime or immediately afterwards, when a child might be more likely to be able to tell or, to give that initial bit of information, because the thing has just happened and they know and they understand what they're being asked about because it's just happened.
Because it's in the context.
Yes, exactly that. Because it's another thing, isn't it? We can talk about that later, but children don't always know why they're there. So I think training for first response officers could be, it could really change a lot for children.
So we've already been talking with some of the police that we trained recently around when they arrive on a scene and they have their cameras, their body-worn cameras, and they do an initial kind of Q&A, question and answers. And we're already talking to them about using that as part of rapport building.
Absolutely. Yeah, so to actually make sure, because these police officers, they rarely have any interview training, right? So then to have specialty training is like, that's not happening, right? So to actually empower them or enable them to ask the right questions, really, really crucial.
Yes.
And I think also to get that is the moment when the child contacts the police. They're in an urgency. You get it. It's the unfiltered truth, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the unfiltered truth. And it's also potentially that child's first experience of the police. And if that can be a positive one, then that child can be better protected throughout the rest of their lives.
One of our founder members of Triangle, Ruth Marchant, who sadly died a few years ago, one of her kind of mission statements was to change the world. At Triangle, we can go out there and change the world. And I think something that we feel very strongly about in Triangle is children and young people having being given education, safe education about their body and private parts and safety. And that's not to say it's putting the onus on the children to keep themselves safe, because obviously it isn't. But what it is to say is that if children are taught safely and in a fun way in nursery schools, we're using really good resources about what's safe touch and unsafe touch, and the same with secrets, safe secrets and unsafe secrets. At Triangle, we've designed our own resources, but there's a lot else out there. I think that's key to children and young people saying things earlier, There was a young person we interviewed a few years ago who was about 14, and she'd been very sheltered. She'd been brought up with a very abusive father, lots of domestic violence as well as sexual violence. And one thing that will never leave me, I think, is her saying at the end of the interview, and we always ask, is there anything else you want the judge to know?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I want to know, why did no one tell me about this? Why wasn't I taught that this wasn't right? And her experience had been that age 14, she was finally allowed to go for a sleepover at a friend's house. And while getting ready for bed, she said to her friend, well, when's your dad coming in? And the friend kind of said, what do you mean? She said, well, at my house, my dad comes in and this is what happens. And this was how this case kind of came to light, was because the friend told her parents, and then obviously they contacted the police. So to me, that question of why wasn't I educated? Why wasn't I told about this? And she's not the only young person. We interviewed another young person, didn't we, who was part of...
She did learn at school, but it wasn't until she was in secondary school,
mm-hmm.
in a personal social health lesson,
mm-hmm.
that she learned that it wasn't okay for adults to do those things to you.
Mm. And this had been, again, going on for years.
Oh, yeah. And it took her until 11 or 12 at school to be taught that. So we need to be teaching children much, much younger. And because if it's always happened to you and you don't know any different,
mm-hmm.
why would you tell someone?
Yeah, so that's definitely a societal change.
Huge.
There's one more thing I would really like to ask you, because I know that there's a lot of police officers in the UK and everywhere that are going through a lot of trauma in their own work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think you guys are working with such, the themes that you work with are so heartbreaking for anyone who wants to help people. How do you deal with these issues in your work? How do you manage to stay clear in your minds and mentally healthy?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think it's quite different for us, isn't it,
mm-hmm.
to the police? But we can talk about both. For us, we debrief after every interview. So we spend time together talking about how it went, but also how that made us feel. And so we've got kind of peer support in that. Also,
we rarely work alone.
No.
So we will always hear the same things, whether one of us is in the recording room or in the interview room. We'll still be, open to the same information. So for some child will say one thing that maybe I will go, I found that a bit much, or Carly might say, I found that a bit much, and I won't. It's interesting how the different children and the different situations maybe press different buttons for us, I suppose. But having that debrief is key. And we also have another colleague who will critically read reports and sometimes be involved in the planning. So she'll often check in with one of us, or we'll ask her opinion. We have access to a psychotherapist for supervision. We have regular supervision, and we also have access to 24-hour counselling line that's completely confidential.
Yeah, so our interviewing team, we would, because we either interview together or with another colleague, and sort of but any combination of pairs within that, right?
Yeah.
So there's always someone around for us to talk to. But with the police, I think it's a really different story. They have, I think, very little protection against that sort of secondary trauma. A lot of the police forces that we've talked to say that, they get a well-being questionnaire once a year, but then they don't have that same opportunity that we do of debriefing after every interview. And
not at all. And actually, at the last training that we did here with the police, we had quite a long conversation about how, just in their role as a police officer, it's assumed that you should deal with things like this. Like, there's an assumption that, you signed up for that job, you want to do it, so almost why are you moaning that you've just seen this or that? So we there was one case where the officer was saying, well, I knew it affected me, but I felt like I couldn't go to anyone because it's part of my job. Like, you know, why did this one affect me, but the other 20 didn't? And I didn't want them to then be going, well, maybe you should be moved over to a different area, because I love my job. I just needed a bit more help with this. And we know for us as humans, we've all had different backgrounds, we've all had different upbringings, and there'll be different triggers. And sometimes it won't even be something that's said. It might be a smell or a sight, you know, and being able to identify that ourselves is key, and being able to open up about that and acknowledge that, yes, you know, I did sign up to be a police officer, but still hearing this, it can be really difficult. I gave an example of, you know, that, you know, I have certain friends, obviously, that I will talk more to than others. And I know sometimes if I'm with a certain group of friends, everyone will go around the table and say, oh, how was your day? How was your day? And they'll completely bypass me.
Yes.
Because they don't want to know how my day is, because they don't want to know that this really happens and that this is a world that we live in.
So real conversation killer at parties,
Real
isn't it? What do you do as a job? Interview children that have been abused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do have quite a sense of humour as well. I'd say that's another coping mechanism for us, that, you know, you have to make things, you know, see a lighter side to life. And Carly and I both enjoy walking a lot as well, don't we? So having those extra outdoor things. We both have pets, you have gardening. You know, it's having that free time, that balance of nurture for yourself and your families, other than your work, which I suppose is the same for all jobs, but particularly where you're working with.
Yeah. So you see that, you know, bringing any of those sort of support systems, or what you have, could be beneficial for the police. Having a 24/7 line where you can call.
There was one police force that did have something similar, but what they said was that often there was a case where that you don't have a time to, before you're on your next case, you don't have time to kind of ring up and process.
Yeah.
So this kind of links to the secondary trauma a bit, that you're just adding on, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, there are services as well in the UK, aren't there? For, like, there are text services and phone services that those police and other kind of blue light workers can access. But yeah, I don't think I think the issue is often the time not being available.
I think it's the time and the expectation of the role. And when we train them here, I mean, very much, you know, you are humans, you're going to have your own triggers. What you're going to be hearing is horrendous. And, you know, you need to be able to have people within your organisation that you can go to and go, God, that was really hard. And, you know, and have an offload and acknowledge that, and not be seen as, oh, well, that's your job, get on with it, don't come moaning to me. So it's that openness, I suppose, really, isn't it? That we are all humans, and that it would be wrong. You shouldn't be in this job if nothing affected you.
Yeah. And investing in support services, you know, I think would reduce burnout. So
Absolutely.
yes, you know, you need to spend money allowing people that time, but it saves you money in the long run.
Exactly.
And also in England for the police, I know that they a lot of police careers are only 30 years, and that's due to the stress and the nature of the job. That actually, well,
that's changing now.
It is changing. But my point with that also, that adds on the pressure, I think, as well, for some officers.
Yes, true.
Yeah. Okay, we're coming to the end of this conversation, but I was just wondering about one thing. But there's been a series on Netflix called Adolescence. I don't know if you watched that one. It's about a boy who's a suspect of a murder, and that has brought a lot of discussion around social media here in Norway, but also around interviewing of children and suspect interviewing of children suspects. Do you work with child suspects at all? Are you called in by the police to do that type of work?
No, but we would love to be. No, we aren't really asked to do that kind of work as interviewers, but our intermediary teams do. So provide intermediaries for suspect interviews, and they'll go in. Intermediaries are people who specialise in communication, and they facilitate the communication between the child or young person or adult and the police or the court, whoever's trying to communicate with that person. So they're the middle, making sure that the police are asking questions that the child can understand and that the child is understanding the questions that they're being asked. A lot of the time there's a real breakdown where adults don't even realise that the child's misunderstood the question. It happens so much. We see it loads. So we do that for suspect interviews, but it's not, I don't think it's a right for child suspects yet, is it?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't think I don't think they have a right to an intermediary as sort of standard under a certain age, which is worrying, because I think a lot of child suspects have additional needs, especially those who are involved in child exploitation cases, organised crime, because that's part of why they have become a target. So they have these additional needs and communication needs as a result. And I think that the support really needs to be there. I've never really understood why. So in the UK, our justice system is centred around innocent until proven guilty, but why don't we treat suspects the same as witnesses then?
Yes, because maybe they are actually also a witness. Or
Exactly that. And having good quality, clear, coherent, accurate evidence, which is what you achieve by using an intermediary or by using specialist interviewers, that that benefits everybody.
Exactly.
And it makes
detail.
exactly, and it's more likely that justice will be achieved. Yeah, so we would love to be more involved, and hopefully that's a real growing area.
I think our only experience of suspect interviewing is where there's been family cases where there's been abuse within the family, within siblings.
Yeah, and we interview all of the siblings.
Yes.
One of them has accused another one of them of a crime.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So
indirectly, but
indirectly.
that's not why you were called in.
No, well, it has been.
It has been with a couple of cases.
It has been.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were asked to interview a boy about rape, and then later we were asked to interview his siblings, one of whom was the accused. So, yes, sort of. I mean, that was the reason we were called in the first place, was the rape accusation. But yeah,
and our interview process was the same for both the witness and the suspect.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that we feel that a lot of these young people are just as vulnerable, and they need the same support, and the need to come in with an open mind and a fair approach.
Yes. So we saw each other at the conference in March, where you also went through the Orbit training, which was very interesting, I thought. And then we have another conference coming up in 2026, and we're hoping that you will be there to run some training for those who would like to learn from you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. Very excited about that.
Yes. So hopefully we can also bring some international practitioners who would like to learn from you guys as well. So
yeah, definitely. That's great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And we could probably talk for a lot longer, but thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.